If you drink water today, and you almost certainly did, there is something you were never told about where water can actually come from. Because long before pumps and pipelines and billion-dollar treatment plants existed, people in the driest places on Earth never ran out of water. And what they used was so simple it was eventually thrown away and forgotten. But by the end of this, you will understand why scientists around the world are now racing to bring it back. The world is running out of fresh water faster than most people realize, and this is not a prediction for some distant future. It is happening right now in 2026 across 6 continents simultaneously. The United Nations World Water Development Report released in 2025 confirmed that roughly 2.2 billion people on Earth still lack access to safely managed drinking water services. California, South Africa, India, the Middle East, and parts of Australia have all experienced severe water crises within just the last decade. Cities like Chennai in India and Cape Town in South Africa came dangerously close to what officials called Day Zero, the moment when municipal taps would literally run dry. The cost of modern water infrastructure is staggering, with some desalination plants costing over $1 billion to construct and requiring enormous amounts of electricity to operate. And yet, here is the part that almost nobody talks about. Ancient civilizations solved this exact problem thousands of years ago using nothing but gravity, stone, and a deep understanding of how rain behaves. They did not need electricity, they did not need chemical treatment plants, and they did not need engineers with university degrees. What they had was something far more powerful. Centuries of observation passed down through generations, an intimate knowledge of landscape, weather, and the movement of water across earth and rock. The system they built is broadly known as rainwater harvesting, but that simple term hides an incredible diversity of ingenious methods that varied from desert to jungle to mountain. To understand why these systems were so effective, you first need to understand something fundamental about rain that most people never consider. When rain falls on a modern city, roughly 80 to 90% of it becomes surface runoff, meaning it flows across concrete and asphalt and rushes into storm drains and eventually out to sea, completely wasted. In a natural landscape, or one designed for rainwater harvesting, that number flips, with 70 to 80% of rain being captured, absorbed, and stored. The difference is not the amount of rain, it is what happens to the rain after it lands. Ancient engineers understood this principle deeply, and they designed entire landscapes to catch, slow, channel, and store every single drop. One of the oldest and most spectacular examples comes from the Thar Desert in Rajasthan, India, where annual rainfall can be as low as 100 to 200 millimeters per year. In this punishing environment, communities built structures called tankas, which are underground cisterns carved into limestone bedrock, sometimes lined with a special plaster made from lime and ash that made them completely waterproof. The catchment area surrounding each tanka was carefully shaped and smoothed so that even a brief 10-minute rain shower would send water flowing directly into the storage chamber below. A single well-designed tanka could hold enough water to sustain a family for an entire dry season lasting 8 to 10 months. But tankas were only the beginning, because the people of Rajasthan also built something far more ambitious called johads, which are crescent-shaped earthen dams that capture rainwater and allow it to slowly percolate into the ground, recharging underground aquifers. A johad does not just store water on the surface, it pushes water deep into the earth, where it remains cool, clean, and protected from evaporation. This is a principle that modern hydrologists call managed aquifer recharge, and it is considered one of the most promising water security strategies of the 21st century, yet it was practiced in India over 3,000 years ago. Further west, in the Negev Desert of modern-day Israel, the ancient Nabatean civilization perfected a completely different approach. The Nabateans, who thrived from around the 4th century before the Common Era to the 1st century of the Common Era, built an empire in one of the driest regions on Earth. Their secret was an elaborate system of channels, terraces, and cisterns carved directly into the desert rock, designed to capture flash floodwater during the rare but intense desert rainstorms. Archaeologists from Ben Gurion University of the Negev have studied these systems extensively and found that the Nabateans could farm crops in areas receiving less than 100 millimeters of annual rainfall. They achieved this by creating catchment areas up to 30 times larger than the actual planted fields, funneling enormous volumes of runoff into small, concentrated growing zones. Modern researchers attempted to replicate Nabatean farming techniques in the same desert and confirmed that the ancient systems were remarkably efficient, often outperforming modern drip irrigation in terms of water use per kilogram of food produced. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the ancient Maya civilization in Central America developed their own extraordinary rainwater harvesting infrastructure. The great Maya city of Tikal, which at its peak housed up to 90,000 people, sat on porous limestone with no rivers or lakes anywhere nearby. The Maya solved this by building an integrated system of plazas, reservoirs, and filtration channels that collected rainwater from the plastered surfaces of their pyramids and public squares. Research published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2020 revealed that the Maya even used zeolite and quartz sand filtration in their reservoirs, a natural water purification method that removed harmful microbes and sediment. This means that over 1,000 years before European cities had any form of water treatment, the Maya were filtering their drinking water using mineral-based purification. The scale was extraordinary, with Tikal's reservoir system estimated to hold over 900,000 cubic meters of water, enough to sustain the entire city through a dry season. Across the Mediterranean, the Romans took rainwater harvesting to an industrial scale with their famous cisterns. The Basilica cistern in Istanbul, built in the year 536 under Emperor Justinian I, could hold 80,000 cubic meters of water and featured over 300 marble columns supporting its vaulted ceiling. Roman homes across the empire featured a standard architectural element called the impluvium, a shallow pool in the center of the atrium designed to catch rainwater falling through a corresponding opening in the roof called the compluvium. This captured water was then channeled into underground cisterns for household use, a system so elegant that it required 0 mechanical parts and 0 energy input. In the highlands of Peru, the Inca Empire engineered an entirely different water harvesting masterpiece. The Incas built thousands of kilometers of stone channels called acequias that diverted mountain rainwater and glacial melt to terraced agricultural fields, called andines. At the archaeological site of Tipon near Cusco, researchers have documented Inca hydraulic engineering so precise that water channels maintained consistent flow rates across elevation changes of hundreds of meters. The Inca system was not just about harvesting rain, it was about controlling water with the precision of a modern engineering firm, using nothing but carefully cut stone and an understanding of gravity. In the Atacama Desert of Chile, often called the driest place on Earth, indigenous communities developed fog collectors, simple mesh structures that capture tiny water droplets from coastal fog and channel them into collection troughs. Some areas of the Atacama receive less than 1 millimeter of rain per year, yet fog collectors can harvest between 3 to 15 liters of water per square meter of mesh per day. This technology, which has roots going back centuries, was studied and modernized by researchers at the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile and has since been deployed in over 30 countries. Now here is the part of this story that should make you wonder about everything you thought you knew about progress. If all these systems worked so well for so long, why did they disappear? The answer is a combination of colonialism, industrialization, centralized government planning, and a fundamental shift in how societies thought about water. When the British colonized India, they systematically dismantled the traditional water harvesting infrastructure that had sustained communities for millennia. Colonial administrators viewed local water systems as primitive and replaced them with centralized canal networks and piped water systems that gave the government control over water distribution. Historian David Hardiman of the University of Warwick documented how British colonial policies in Western India led to the deliberate neglect and destruction of thousands of traditional tanks, stepwells, and johads. Communities that had been water self-sufficient for centuries suddenly became dependent on government infrastructure that was often unreliable and inequitable. A similar pattern played out across the colonized world, from North Africa to Southeast Asia to the Americas. Indigenous water knowledge was dismissed as backward, and local systems were abandoned in favor of industrial scale dams, pipelines, and pumping stations. The irony is devastating, because many of the modern systems that replaced ancient rainwater harvesting are now failing. Large dams silt up and lose capacity over decades. Concrete pipelines crack and leak. Pumping stations require expensive electricity, and centralized treatment plants create single points of failure. The American Society of Civil Engineers gave United States water infrastructure a grade of C- in their 2021 report card, estimating that the country needs to invest over $600 billion just to maintain existing systems over the next 20 years. Meanwhile, a traditional johad in Rajasthan costs the equivalent of a few $100s to build, requires 0 electricity, and can function for centuries with minimal maintenance. The contrast is almost absurd, but the story does not end with loss because something remarkable has been happening in recent decades. In 1985, a man named Rajendra Singh arrived in the village of Gopalpura in the Alwar district of Rajasthan, India. The area was devastated by drought, 5 rivers had gone dry, forests had disappeared, and villages were being abandoned. Singh, guided by an elderly village elder, began reviving the ancient Johad system, building small earthen dams to capture monsoon rainwater and recharge groundwater. Within a few years, the results were extraordinary, as wells that had been dry for decades began flowing again. The 5 dead rivers came back to life, and forests started regrowing naturally. Over the next 3 decades, Singh and his organization, Tarun Bharat Sangh, built over 11,700 johads across more than 1,000 villages. His work was so impactful that he was awarded the Ramon Magsaysay Award in 2001 and the Stockholm Water Prize in 2015, sometimes called the Nobel Prize of Water. Rajendra Singh proved that ancient rainwater harvesting technology was not obsolete. It had simply been abandoned. In 2023, the Indian government launched the Jal Shakti Abhiyan, a massive campaign to revive traditional water harvesting structures across the country, drawing directly on the principles Singh had championed. Across the world, modern engineers and scientists are now rediscovering and improving upon ancient rainwater harvesting with new materials and design tools. At the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, researchers developed a fog harvesting mesh inspired by the Negev desert beetle, whose shell has evolved microscopic bumps and channels that capture fog droplets with stunning efficiency. The MIT-designed mesh can harvest up to 5 times more water per square meter than traditional fog nets, bringing this ancient concept into the realm of advanced materials science. In Australia, a country plagued by cyclical droughts, rainwater tanks are now required by building codes in many states, with over 3 million households collecting rainwater as of 2024. Australian research from the Cooperative Research Centre for Water-Sensitive Cities has shown that widespread urban rainwater harvesting can reduce municipal water demand by up to 40%. In sub-Saharan Africa, organizations like WaterAid and Rain Foundation are helping communities build modern versions of traditional rainwater harvesting systems, using ferocement tanks and first flush diverters that improve water quality. A study published in the journal Water Research in 2022 found that properly designed household rainwater harvesting systems in East Africa can provide safe drinking water at less than 1/10 the cost of piped municipal supply. In the ancient city of Jaipur, India, the historic stepwells called Bowries are being restored not as tourist attractions, but as functional water infrastructure. These stepwells, some dating back to the 9th century, are architectural marvels that descend multiple stories underground, with elaborate staircases leading down to the water level, serving as both reservoirs and cool communal gathering spaces. The step well design is ingenious because it provides access to water at any depth, meaning that even as water levels drop during the dry season, people can simply walk further down to reach the receding waterline. Modern urban planners in Singapore, one of the most water-scarce nations on Earth, have integrated rainwater harvesting into the very fabric of the city, with buildings designed to channel rainwater into a network of canals and reservoirs. Singapore's Marina Barrage, completed in 2008, captures rainwater from a catchment area covering 1/6 of the entire island nation. The city-state now meets up to 30% of its water needs through rainwater collection, a strategy they call their 4 national TAPS framework. In Berlin, Germany, a pilot program called the Sponge City Initiative is redesigning urban neighborhoods to absorb and store rainwater instead of flushing it into sewers. Green roofs, permeable pavements, rain gardens, and underground infiltration chambers work together to mimic the natural water cycle within a dense urban environment. China has committed even more aggressively to this concept, designating 30 pilot sponge cities with a total investment exceeding the equivalent of $12 billion, all based on the principle that cities should absorb rain like a sponge rather than repel it like concrete. This idea that a city can harvest its own rain is not a futuristic fantasy. It is a return to the principles that ancient civilizations understood intuitively. The science behind why rainwater is so valuable goes deeper than most people realize. Rainwater is naturally soft, meaning it contains almost no dissolved minerals, making it ideal for drinking, cooking, and irrigation without the scaling problems that hard groundwater causes. A study from Monash University in Melbourne found that rainwater collected from clean rooftops in urban areas consistently met World Health Organization drinking water guidelines with only minimal treatment. Rainwater is also slightly acidic due to dissolved carbon dioxide, which makes it excellent for plant growth, as many nutrients in soil become more available to roots in slightly acidic conditions. Farmers in ancient Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and Mesoamerica all understood this empirically, even without modern chemistry to explain it. The thermal properties of stored rainwater are another hidden advantage, as water stored in underground cisterns, or deep tanks remains naturally cool, reducing the need for energy-intensive refrigeration and food preservation. In the ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro, part of the Indus Valley civilization, dating to around 2500 before the Common Era, archaeologists have found elaborate brick-lined drains and what appears to be the Great Bath, a large waterproof reservoir that may have served both ritual and practical water storage purposes. The engineering precision of Mohenjo-Daro's water systems, including household bathrooms connected to covered drains, was not matched in Europe until the Roman era over 2,000 years later. Every one of these ancient examples points to the same conclusion: that rainwater harvesting is not a primitive technology, but a sophisticated science that was independently discovered by virtually every major civilization on Earth. The modern world's dependence on centralized water systems has created a dangerous vulnerability that climate change is now exposing with brutal clarity. As rainfall patterns become more erratic and extreme, with longer droughts punctuated by intense flooding events, the rigid infrastructure of modern water systems is increasingly unable to cope. A decentralized network of rainwater harvesting systems, by contrast, is inherently resilient because it has no single point of failure and can capture water exactly where and when it falls. The World Resources Institute published a report in 2024 showing that nature-based solutions, including rainwater harvesting, could provide up to 37% of the climate change mitigation needed by 2030. Even the United Nations Environment Program has formally recognized traditional rainwater harvesting as a key strategy for climate adaptation in their Global Environment Outlook reports. What is perhaps most remarkable about this entire story is how recent the rediscovery truly is. For most of the 20th century, rainwater harvesting was actively discouraged in many developed countries, with some jurisdictions in the United States making it illegal to collect rainwater on your own property. Colorado did not fully legalize residential rainwater harvesting until 2016, based on legal doctrines dating back to the 1800s that classified rainwater as belonging to downstream water rights holders. The idea that a person could be prohibited from collecting rain falling on their own roof strikes most people as absurd, yet it was law in multiple American states for over a century. As of 2025, all 50 U.S. states now permit some form of rainwater harvesting, though regulations vary widely. The shift from prohibition to encouragement tells a powerful story about how societies are finally recognizing what ancient civilizations always knew, that rain is not waste to be drained away, but a precious resource to be captured and treasured. A single rooftop in a region receiving just 500 millimeters of annual rainfall, roughly what Los Angeles receives, can collect over 50,000 liters of water per year. That is enough to meet a significant portion of a household's non-potable water needs, including garden irrigation, toilet flushing, and laundry. With proper filtration, it can meet potable water standards as well. The technology required is breathtakingly simple. A clean catchment surface, a gutter system, a first flush diverter to discard the initial dirty runoff, a storage tank, and optionally a simple sand and charcoal filter. The total cost for a basic household system in many developing countries ranges from $20 to $200 US, a fraction of what communities spend on bottled water or trucked water deliveries. The return on investment, both financial and in terms of human health and dignity, is enormous. A randomized, controlled trial published in the Lancet Global Health in 2021 found that households with rainwater harvesting systems in rural Bangladesh experienced 41% fewer cases of waterborne diarrheal disease compared to control households. Children in those households showed measurable improvements in growth and school attendance, demonstrating that water access is not just an infrastructure problem, but a human development issue. Women and girls, who in many developing regions spend hours each day walking to distant water sources, gained back time that they could invest in education and economic activities. The ripple effects of something as simple as catching rain on a rooftop extended to health, education, gender equality, economic development, and climate resilience all at once. No single modern technology intervention delivers such broad co-benefits at such low cost. And yet, rainwater harvesting still receives a tiny fraction of the global investment directed toward large-scale centralized water infrastructure. The World Bank estimates that global spending on water infrastructure exceeds $100 billion annually, but less than 2% of that goes toward decentralized rainwater harvesting systems. This imbalance is slowly changing as evidence mounts and as climate pressures intensify. Universities from Stanford to the Indian Institute of Technology are now running dedicated research programs on optimizing rainwater harvesting for the 21st century, integrating sensors, smart valves, and predictive weather algorithms to maximize capture efficiency. Startups in Kenya, Brazil, and India are developing affordable modular rainwater harvesting kits that can be installed in a single afternoon with no specialized tools. Some architects are designing entire buildings as rainwater harvesting machines, with roofs shaped like funnels and facades that channel condensation into storage systems embedded in the building's foundation. The next generation of rainwater harvesting will look nothing like a mud dam or a clay pot, but the underlying principle will be exactly the same: catch what the sky gives you and waste nothing. There's a quiet revolution happening right now in villages and cities and research labs across every continent, a revolution that is really just a remembering. The most powerful water technology ever invented was not invented at all. It was observed, copied from nature, refined over millennia, abandoned in the rush toward industrial modernity, and now rediscovered just in time. Sometimes the solution to humanity's greatest challenges is not waiting in a laboratory or a factory. It is buried in the knowledge of those who came before us, waiting patiently in the dust and stone and memory of civilizations that understood something we forgot. The rain is still falling, and the only question is whether we are wise enough to catch it.